Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 Season 23 Patch 2.7 Wizard Build Guide. This guide will cover the Wizard's Tal Rasha Frozen Orb build, which is the most powerful Tal Rasha build that you can run, and with Tal Rasha being the starter set for Season 23 for Wizards, you might want to get the most out of Tal Rashas before you transition to Firebirds, and of course we have a guide for Firebirds here as well. This will be the most powerful, probably, if not the most powerful, then one of the most powerful wizard builds of Season 23. However, with this patch, we've also introduced leaderboards specific to every set or non-set. So if you want to stick with Tal Rasha, and odds are not a lot of people will be playing Tal Rasha, so you have a pretty good chance of ranking high on the Tal Rasha leaderboards. This will be the best build to top the Tal Rasha leaderboards. Now, the gameplay footage you're seeing here is a Greater Rift 125 performed by top player Lulu, and you can feel free to follow along with the written version of this guide written by top player Chewy on maxroll.gg, link in the video description. In this video, we're going to cover the gear, the skills, the follower, and the gameplay that you'll want to rock this build. And it all starts with the Tal Rasha set. The 2-piece bonus, damaging enemies with arcane, cold, fire, or lightning will cause a meteor of the same damage type to fall from the sky. There's an 8-second cooldown for each damage type. Now, Tal Rasha's is the Elementalist. You're going to want to be using all 4 elements in order to maximize your damage. However, the 2-piece bonus is irrelevant to us. Moving on to the 4-piece. Attacks with each of those 4 different elements each increase all your resistances by 25% for 8 seconds. That will culminate in 100% increased resistances. And then lastly, the 8-piece. Attacks increase your damage by 2000% for 8 seconds, and that's for every individual element. So Arcane will be 2000, Cold will be 2000, Fire 2000, Lightning 2000, stacking for a total of 8000% increased damage at 4 stacks, so long as you keep up your elemental rotation. Now, since this will be a Frozen Orb build, classic sorceress from D2, right? We're gonna take an Unstable Scepter. The damage of Arcane Orb is increased by 450%, and its explosion triggers an additional time. Frozen Orb, of course, is an Arcane Orb rune. We'll also want to take a Triumvirate. Your signature spells increase the damage of Arcane Orb by 400% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times, and we want to ensure that we maintain those 3 stacks. We'll also want to take in our cube a Wizard Spike. Performing an attack has a 25% chance to hurl a Frozen Orb, but more importantly, Arcane Orb deals 350% increased damage. In our cube, we'll also work in an Aquila Cuirass. While above 90% primary resource, all damage taken is reduced by 50%. Now, wizards regenerate their resource very rapidly, so while you're blasting your Frozen Orbs, you might not be benefiting from that Aquila, but outside of that, when you need that extra toughness, you should be able to maintain this Aquila buff. We're going to take a Halo of Carini, very important for wizards, huge defensive buff. You take 80% less damage for 5 seconds after your Storm Armor electrocutes an enemy more than 15 yards away. This is a buff that we should have up all the time. We'll also work a Ring of Royal Grandeur into this build, putting it in the cube so that we can equip 2 other sets. Captain Crimson's via the pants and boots. This will give us 20% cooldown reduction, 20% resource cost reduction. That resource cost reduction will come in very handy. And the 3-piece increases your damage by your percentage of cooldown reduction and increases your damage reduction by your amount of resource cost reduction. And thanks to Tal Rasha's having a very specific set of gear that's distinct from most other sets, we'll be equipping the helm, chest, belt, gloves, and amulet of Tal Rasha, thereby allowing us to also work in Oghild set, the shoulders, and the bracers. 2-piece reduces damage taken by 15%, increases damage dealt by 30%, and the 3-piece reduces damage from elites by 30%, increases damage against elites by 30%. So we're rocking 3 sets here thanks to our Ring of Royal Grandeur and the unique configuration of Tal Rasha's set pieces. And we're going to round out the build with a convention of elements. Because we're using Frozen Orb as our primary damage dealer, we want to ensure, or if you want to optimize your play, that during your cold rotation you are blasting those Frozen Orbs, and outside of that you can be repositioning, you can be focusing on your defense, but you don't absolutely have to focus on your convention rotation. I know a lot of people don't like doing that. I know a lot of people, convention of element builds are deal breakers. It's not critically important for this build. There's not a huge amount of windows to line up with this build. So if you want to just set it and forget it, you can do that. But the optimum way to play will be to be blasting your damage in that cold rotation. Now, before we go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, let's first take a look at the skills. Of course, we're taking Arcane Orb, Frozen Orb. At the cost of 30 Arcane Power, we're using the best orb on Arcane Orb, launching a Frozen Orb that's shooting out shards of ice. Next, we're taking Storm Armor, Shocking Aspect. We need this for our Halo of Carini. Huge defensive buff. The damage it deals to enemies is irrelevant. Inconsequential. And we're going to take the Shocking Aspect rune because critical hits have a chance to electrocute a nearby enemy for 425% weapon damage as lightning. We don't care about this damage, but this will help us with our uptime on our Halo of Carini. The Shocking Aspect zap counts for purposes of the Halo. Next, we'll take Teleport Calamity. This is both for mobility, and the Calamity rune creates a arcane wave of force. This will trigger our arcane damage for purposes of Tal Rasha and our build in general. So for now, we've got covered our cold damage with Frozen Orb, our arcane damage with Teleport, and you might say, well, we have lightning covered because of Storm Armor, but that doesn't actually trigger our Tal Rasha bonus. So we need to work in a lightning skill as well as a fire skill. So for our fire skill, we'll take Magic Missile, Conflagrate, and literally our sole purpose for taking this is for fire stacks. And then for lightning, we'll take Shock Pulse, Piercing Orb. So these are 2 signature spells, and remember that our Triumvirate will benefit from stacking 3 stacks of signature spell casts. Then lastly, we'll take Black Hole Absolute Zero. This is for crowd controlling enemies, pulling them into a group so that you can then launch your Frozen Orbs at them while they're all grouped up and can suffer area damage, and the Absolute Zero rune gives you a damage buff for each enemy hit, which, if you're getting a big group, can add up to quite a lot of damage. So again, you want to be popping that right before you let fly your Frozen Orbs as your convention window comes up. For our passives, we'll take Power Hungry. You deal 30% additional damage to enemies farther than 30 yards away. We'll want to keep our distance for just 30% more damage. Huge, huge buff. We'll take Elemental Exposure. This was built for Tal Rasha's or vice versa. Damaging enemies with Arcane Cold Fire or Lightning will cause them to take 5% more damage from your attacks for 5 seconds, stacks. So, because we're going to be doing this already, we'll have 20% more damage. We're going to take Evocation, reduce all cooldowns by 20%. Not only do we benefit from the cooldown itself, but with Captain Crimson's, this translates into more damage. And then lastly, Illusionist. When you take more than 15% of your max life and damage within 1 second, the cooldowns on Mirror Image, Slow Time, and Teleport are reset. You also will gain a movement speed buff for 3 seconds after using Teleport. So this helps us when we're in a tight spot to get out of danger by giving us back our Teleport. Now let's go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear. On our Oghild's shoulders, Intelligence, Vitality, cooldown, area damage. For our helm, Tal Rasha's, Intelligence, Crit Chance, Arcane Orb damage, Diamond for cooldown. For our Tal Rasha's amulet, cold damage, crit chance, crit damage. For our Tal Rasha's chest piece, Intelligence, Vitality, attack speed, which rolls on this chest piece, and reduced damage from elites. For what you want in your chest and pants sockets, if you want more damage. Topazes for intelligence if you want more toughness, rubies or emeralds for more armor. Gloves, Tal Rasha's, crit chance, crit damage, cooldown, area damage. Our bracers, Oghild's, cold damage, intelligence, vitality, crit chance. Our Tal Rasha's belt, intelligence, vitality, life, armor. Our Captain Crimson's pants, intelligence, vitality, armor. Captain Crimson's boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, arcane orb damage. On our Halo of Carini, crit chance, crit damage, area damage. Our Convention of Elements, same thing, crit chance, crit damage, area damage. On our Unstable Scepter, percent damage, area damage, attack speed. Lastly, on your weapon, you want to roll arcane damage. And this will be because our elemental exposure will use your weapon damage type. So with Frozen Orb, we're launching cold attacks pretty often. With Magic Missile, we're launching fire pretty often. With Shock Pulse, we're launching lightning pretty often. But the Calamity Rune on Teleport is not a very reliable way to keep up your elemental exposure buff, so getting Arcane on your weapon will naturally be applying with every attack the Arcane stack. And our Triumvirate, crit chance, area damage, Arcane power on crit, Arcane orb damage. For our legendary gems, we're taking a Bane of the Trapped. Huge amount more damage against crowd-controlled enemies. That shouldn't be a problem applying those crowd controls. Zaeith's Stone of Vengeance. The further you are away from your enemies, the more damage you deal to them. This pairs nicely with Audacity. We want to keep enemies at range, launch our Frozen Orbs, benefit from that Zaeith. For reference, 50 yards is roughly half a screen away, so if you're keeping enemies at the edge of your screen, that is the maximum benefit that you can get from Zaeith. Then lastly, for Greater Rift, pushing Bane of the Stricken. The more you attack an enemy, the more damage you deal against that enemy, and against the Rift Guardian specifically, 25% increased damage. If, however, it's taking you less than 2 minutes to kill the Rift Guardian, you can go with a Bane of the Powerful instead. Onto our follower, we're gonna take the Templar. He's gonna help us stay alive. So for his skills, we're taking Heal. 30-second cooldown, gives you a heal, but this is one of the rare follower powers that benefits from cooldown reduction. So we're going to try to get him to heal us as often as possible. We're going to take Loyalty for that life regeneration. We're going to take Onslaught, not because of his damage followers deal no damage, but because he'll make us deal 10% increased damage to that target. And lastly, we'll take Guardian. When we take fatal damage, he saves our life, 2-minute cooldown. As for what gear you want, we're gonna take the Enchanting Favor to make him invulnerable. We'll take a Flavor of Time. This will emanate to us, meaning that it's as though we're wearing it for purposes of the legendary power, so pylon effects will last twice as long for us. Same thing with Nemesis Bracers emanates to us. When we click on a shrine, it'll be as though we're wearing the Nems. Homing Pad Shoulders. Not mandatory, just a little quality of life thing that'll emanate to us if we ever want to portal out in the middle of a Greater Rift, which you don't really want to be doing anyway. You will be able to do so without being interrupted. We want to give him Captain Crimson set, 2 pieces, belt and pants. Again, he benefits from cooldown and we only care about that 2-piece for him. We'll give him Ice Climbers to make him immune to freeze and immobilize effects. We'll give him a Leoric's Crown with a diamond in it in order to give him even more cooldown reduction. We're going to give him an Oculus Ring, chance to create an area of focused power on killing a monster. This will be a golden pool on the ground. When you stand in it, you'll gain 85% increased damage. For the gloves, doesn't matter, there are no gloves that will benefit us during a Greater Rift. Gloves of Worship will buff shrine effects, so you can put those so that when you're in a regular rift or just out in the world, your shrine effects will last longer. This will emanate to you, but again, there are no shrines in Greater Rifts, so not useful. For his other ring, you can go with a Unity if you also want to get a Unity on yourself. So for those who don't want to bother with the convention of elements or want more toughness, drop the convention, wear a Unity, put a Unity on your Templar as well. As long as he is invulnerable thanks to the Enchanting Favor, this will have the effect of doubling your toughness. Then his weapon and shield don't matter. It should be noted, however, that monsters develop crowd control immunity. The more they get crowd controlled, they eventually build up an immunity. We really care about using our black hole to suck in monsters, so you ideally want to remove from your follower items that will apply crowd controls. Then lastly, for his chest, we'll give him Tal Rasha's just for that little bit of attack speed. For his stat priorities, strength, strength, and strength. Everywhere you can, put strength. In his jewelry, in his pants, in his chest, his abilities scale off strength. Secondary priority is cooldown reduction, tertiary is attack speed. So the gameplay, again, pretty straightforward. You're gonna go into a rift, you're gonna turn on your buffs, you're gonna launch some attacks in order to get your 4-piece defenses up. Then you'll start launching your signature spells, your Magic Missile and your Shock Pulse at enemies to try to attract them, try to aggro them into a group. And then right before your convention of elements cold rotation comes up, you launch your black hole to suck in as many as possible to build up your buff, thanks to the Absolute Zero rune, but also just to group them together. Then when you're sure you have your 4-piece of Tal Rasha buff up, you've hit with all of your 4 elements, you're gonna get as far away as possible and launch those frozen orbs. spam them in your cold rotation. So there's going to be this ebb and flow in your gameplay of getting close to enemies, moving away, getting close, moving away, if you really want to maximize your damage. Now thankfully the Tal Rasha's buff is easier to maintain than it is to first establish. Once you have 4 stacks, if you refresh any stack, you're going to add 2 additional seconds to the duration of the 3 other stacks. So once you have your 4 stacks, all you got to do is hit with your 2 signature spells, and you'll be able to maintain all 4 stacks. You don't have to keep hitting with all of your different elements. Then for your Paragon points, get your move speed up to 25, then put into Vitality until you feel like you're not squishy anymore. This could be about 750 to 1 million life, then dump into Intelligence. For offense, crit damage and crit chance, maintaining a global 10-to-1 ratio between the two, then cooldown, then attack speed. For defense, armor, life percent, all resist, life regen. And for utility, area damage, resource cost reduction, life per hit, and pickup radius. And that's gonna wrap up this guide. But do be sure to have checked out our tier list video on the best builds of Season 23, as well as our fast leveling guide. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.